Hey, this is Will.
And this is James.
We actually spent a lot of time trying to get the physicality of Firewatch nailed down, and one of the big parts of that was getting objects in your hand, like feeling like you could pick things up and touch them. Turned out to be quite a bit of work, though, nothing that was like reinventing the wheel. It was just a matter of getting, very specific offsets and very specific grips for every single item in the game, nearly.
We had tons of concepts, and we were looking at all sorts of games and like Far Cry 2 and things for like where's the best example of grabbing something in the world and it isn't just floating in front of you in the sort of Half-Life 2 style. We ended up just basically popping it into your hand over one frame, but making sure that happens at the exact moment that your hand's swiping over it, and it's worked surprisingly well. There were sorts of strange things as well, though, like these giant hands, and then like you'd put a beer can in his hand and suddenly be like, oh, right, yeah, it looks like a little miniature minibar, airplane can of Coke. And so there are all kinds of strange little things that cropped up. But actually having the objects in your hand and you could turn them around from any angle, it ended up making it worth doing all these super detailed props. Like Ollie would make the fireworks and do just really funny, cool designs that you could only actually see if you turned them around and looked at them really closely. And I think it paid off, basically.
And those are just like a couple of poses that we blend between. Those aren't even very complicated, the lookovers, right?
Yeah, not at all, really. There's basically one for books and there's one for everything else. And it's just pretty much 2 points, like fully to the left and fully to the right, with just like a sort of intelligent blend between those two things. So there were so many items in the game we couldn't have authored individual examines for them all. But even that was ended up being incredibly hard to tune to get just right. Again, lots of iteration.
It's Ollie again.
Oh, it's Jake.
I realized sort of halfway through development that the player has a kind of quite a sort of nebulous idea of what Henry looks like, and that would be a fun thing to play with by getting the player to describe themselves to Delilah, and then having those answers feed into a drawing that you would then find in Delilah's tower at the end of the game.
I think actually even one step back behind that, you had done a sketch really, really early on of the inside of Delilah's tower that just had a drawing of Henry's face and said Henry and pointed at his tower, and I think that was that was the inspiration. Yeah, maybe Delilah just like. I thought that moment already was really cool, that you'd get to Delilah's tower and see that she'd drawn what she thinks you look like and an arrow pointing at your lookout tower. But in that sketch, it was Henry's face, and we're like, how would... I think you said, this doesn't make any sense because she would not draw an on-model perfect Henry.
Right.
And then Sean took the Delilah draws Henry idea and ran with it and made it the conversation for day 3. Mm-hmm. Because I think day 3's initial design was, you nail up some boards. Nels and I had to actually build the end result from all the sketches you did of the different faces, shirts, and mustaches.
Originally I was just going to draw individual drawings for each.
Yeah,
person.
It ended up being well over 1,000, maybe thousands and thousands of variants that would have had to be drawn.
We needed to come up with a smart
solution. we had to do something smarter, so we broke it all down into pieces. And that piece of paper that you find in Delilah's tower is actually, I think, being put together from pieces in real time for each player. Like there's no texture that has any one of those things.
And it allowed us to do a somewhat sort of shonky Delilah drawing, which I think is quite funny and unexpected, given that
I love that Delilah is bad at drawing. It's a game. A game full of everyone who can draw because you drew all of it. So it's good that Delilah just draws
draws bad drawing.
Hi, this is Jane again.
And Chris.
And we are right by the outhouse. And this is also where we decided to put the generator that Henry has to use for power.
To make it as annoying as possible for him when he's using the facilities.
So normally I think the generator is not usually by the outhouse. Usually it's actually under the tower where it would be, more convenient. But we decided to put it there because it's usually more interesting for gameplay if you sort of cluster a few objects of interest together, so it's not just super spread out.
It ended up being a real challenge for audio because most of the time when you're in the tower, you don't want to hear the generator because it would just get annoying and repetitive. But there were certain times, like when you first arrive at the tower and you flip the power switch on and the generator goes on, you want the player to hear the generator, so it needs to be much louder, but then you don't want them to walk down the stairs and the generator's incredibly loud. So I had to do all this weird cheating, basically, to cheat the level of the generator audio volume, depending on what the game needs it to be.
Yeah.
Also, Funny story about the generator. So you found
Yes.
this like classic generator model,
I think it's called a Genero
Generis,
generator.
I think.
Yeah, it's something like that. Basically, I based it off of this real generator, but to not infringe on anyone's brand name, I just changed it a little bit, and I was like, ha ha ha, funny. I would just call it generic.
And then we actually heard from someone we know who works for the real generator company. He was telling us that when he saw that in the game, it cracked him up because at that actual company, when they're like frustrated at their own product, if something is like not doing its job, they actually call it generic generator. Jane managed to
We nailed it.
like completely nail the insider terminology for this classic generator.